Hello, everybody. I'm excited today to make one of my favorite comfort foods, lasagna alla Bolognese. My Italian cousin taught me this recipe years ago, and it is absolutely delicious. Very authentic Italian, not too many ingredients, and it's delicious. So let's get started. So you're gonna need about 2 pounds of I use a beef, veal, and pork blend. If you use beef, I feel like it gets really too heavy and greasy. So you can also, she actually called for just all veal. If you're okay with that, you can do that exclusively. And then you'll need a half of a medium onion, about a half of a carrot, a quarter a stalk of celery, some salt, 2 cloves, 1 can of tomato paste, some Parmesan cheese, and then I'm going to show you how to make a bechamel sauce, and you're going to need some lasagna sheets. I like to use the Barilla, and I'll explain this the whole way through. So to get started, I am going to add about 2 to 3 tablespoons of olive oil in my pot. I like to use a good olive oil because this is really your foundation here for all the flavors. So I've got about a couple tablespoons here. Choose a big pot because you're going to need enough room for all these ingredients. So I've got my big sturdy pot. I have it on about a low to medium heat. And I'm going to get started. I'm just going to dice this onion. The onion, the carrot, and the celery is what is known as a sofrito in Italian. It's really the basis, the foundation of many sauces and dishes there. It's just once you start to smell it, it's a great little base. I also make an incredible minestrone with this as well, but there's so many dishes. In French, it's called a mirepoix, so a lot of cultures use this. Just really easy base. You're just gonna wanna kind of try to dice this. Doesn't have to be perfect because it's going to really soften when you cook this. You're going to end up cooking this dish for about 2 to 3 hours. The actual process of making it isn't that difficult. You're going to see already done there. And it's just the cooking time because you really want all the flavors to blend, and the longer you can just let it cook, the better it will be. So I'm just going to cut these carrots. And then just go ahead and dice this. When you start smelling this, it's fantastic. You know something good is coming. So some recipes call for the onions to be added first, and then carrots, and then the celery. But in this case, I'm just going to, once I'm finished chopping here, just going to stick them all in at the same time over my low heat. See, that's a little much for the celery. Really just want a quarter of that stalk. And like I said, my cousin had taught me this recipe, and the Italians are very good at not over flavoring or putting too much of any one thing in their dishes because it throws off all the taste. So I really want to kind of stick to the recipe because each ingredient that you add has its own flavor, and you really want that to stand out. So I'm finished with this. I'm going to stick this in my pot. The oil has been heated, and stick that in there. And I'm going to give it a stir. And then just wait until you're going to cook it for about 3 to 4 minutes until it is softened. It won't take that long. So I'm going to let that sit for just a minute, turn it up so it gets going. And in the meantime, I'm going to show you, I am going to start my bechamel. Usually you would wait to do this because like I said, the Bolognese takes about 2 to 3 hours to cook. So your bechamel sauce, or bechamelia in Italian, it's a flour, milk, and a little bit of salt mixture with some butter as well. And it just really binds everything together. In the case of this, it's the lasagna. Sometimes you use it for vegetables. And you can make it ahead. You can make it ahead of time. It doesn't take that long, so You can just make it the day of while you're waiting for your lasagna, your bolognese to cook, sorry. You can also, if you decide to make this ahead of time, then you can keep it in just a tightly sealed container in the refrigerator if you decide, so you don't pick up the other flavors from the fridge. So I'm gonna go ahead and melt that butter. I'm just gonna get it started so that while we're making this bolognese, this will get all ready. And I'm going to add, so I've put half a stick of butter, 4 tablespoons of butter into my other pot. You can see this, and then 2 cups of milk into this smaller saucepan. So I'm just gonna get that ready to go so that we have enough time. I'm going to show you, I hear this starting to sizzle a little bit. Okay. So we're gonna start sizzling. And the milk, when you're making the bechamel, you're just going to want it to come just before a boil. So you're gonna see little tiny bubbles on the surface. You wanna scald the milk, but just before. You don't wanna burn it. You just want it to come, I usually do it at a low to medium heat, and you can just see it. Little bubbles start to form. Okay, so that's going, so that will be ready when we jump over to our bechamel sauce in a minute. So this process is, it's not tricky at all. And the bechamel, you shouldn't be afraid of it. It's so much better to make this instead of buying it in the store. It's just so fresh, really good. And this lasagna is incredible. So here we go. It's just keep stirring so nothing burns, but you're gonna want your sofrito, your carrots, onions, celery mix to just soften a little bit, maybe like a golden brown, but not too dark. So just gonna get that, that's looking good. So you'll see my little mixture here. You can't see inside my pot, but that's what that looks like. Okay, so that's going, and I have my cheese, everything else is ready. Okay, so once that is softened, I think that looks just about right. I'm gonna add my meat. All right, I'm gonna do that now. Add my meat. Go. And I have 2 cloves, adding those cloves in there. They should soften at the end. If you can't find them in your sauce, don't worry. I always tell my kids it's good luck. I don't know if that's true, but you can have that one. And I am going to break up this meat with my spoon and just let it brown. So this will take a few minutes. Just want to cover it, coat it with your sofrito. Not too, you don't want to burn the meat. So at a moderate heat. Again, this recipe is on my website, KarenAntonini.com. So you can follow this step by step. I have all the instructions laid out. So, okay. This is, you can actually make this lasagna ahead of time as well. If you want to make it, all the bolognese sauce keeps, you can actually freeze it. It freezes very, very well. You can make it and do your whole lasagna laid out, keep it in the fridge for a couple days, because the longer that the bolognese sauce is together, the flavors blend. The next day is always really amazing. But the first day too, if you don't have time to keep it or can't wait, you can go ahead and eat it. It's delicious. So I'm gonna let that brown. And okay, so that should brown. Right. Just check on my milk, because I don't want anything to burn over here. So while that is cooking, I'm going to show you, I have 3 tablespoons of flour. This is for my bechamel. I've had the 2 cups of milk, which are just coming to just before a boil, my 4 tablespoons of butter, which is melted, and I have a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So I have all this. And you're also going to need a wooden spoon. So always use a wooden spoon when you're making your bechamel. just gonna stir my meat. I'm gonna do too many things at once. Okay, so we're gonna jump over to that bechamel in a minute. I'm just turning the meat. So it is starting to brown. Okay, so you don't want it to burn, like I said, but just get it going. So there we go. Okay, so the bechamel, I'm gonna hold off a minute because I don't want to ruin that process, but you do have, this is all you need for that bechamel. It's very, very easy. It just takes a little bit of time with the stirring. Put that there for now. And this is my salt for my Bolognese. I'll go ahead and open up my tomato sauce. Tomato paste. When you use this tomato paste, I want you to just get tomato paste without any seasoning. Because if you get any kind of seasoning, it's going to really confuse the flavors that you already have in this pot. So you just want the pure tomato paste. So I'm going to go ahead and open that, get that all ready. Go. There. Okay, because we are getting close. The meat is browning. Down my butter. Okay, so it is looking good. It is looking pretty good here. Okay. So this recipe was given to me by my cousin, and I could not believe we had a special occasion one evening. My grandmother's sister, my grandmother had already passed away, but her sister was at my cousin's house, and she made a feast, as Italians generally do. And she made this lasagna, and I could not believe how delicious it was. I begged her for the recipe. She's the source of many of my wonderful Italian recipes, and this one is just really good. Every time I make it, people want more, they want the recipe, so we're making it today. Thought this was a good idea. Okay, so my meat is browned. It's looking good. And what I'm going to do now is add about 1/4 of a cup of some Pinot Grigio. You're just going to put this in here and let it soak up. So whoops, line over there. So just add that in and let it absorb. It's going to take about 3-4 minutes or so to do that. So we're going to let that go ahead and absorb. And then the next thing I'll do is add my tomato paste and the salt. And then once that is all blended, it's going to sit for 2 to 3 hours. So that's all you need to do. So you can see that the process isn't very long. It's just chopping a few ingredients. And a lot of times I'll double the recipe because maybe I'll make a lasagna, maybe I'll keep half of the sauce for another time. You can just use spaghetti. You can use the Bolognese with spaghetti or penne, whatever you want, really. So it's great. I love to be able to pull something out of my freezer on a weeknight, which is always really fun. You can pull it out, and like I said, it freezes really well. Just make sure whenever you're freezing meat, I never believed that, but actually if you seal it really well, it tastes fine. It's really good. So, okay, so that is stirring that. So this is what it looks like so far. In my wine, I'm going to let that just simmer a little bit longer. It's a kind of a moderate heat. And if at any time throughout the process in the 2 to 3 hours, your sauce starts to look a little dry, you can certainly add a little bit, just a little at a time of the Pinot Grigio, just add a little more. You really want a dry white wine. You don't want anything with, like I said, any other flavors, not too fruity, just a dry white wine. And that's going to help it out so it's not too dry. But this should be plenty. Okay, so that looks like it's dried up. So now I'm going to take my tomato paste, just put it right in here. Pull that out. Great. And again, try to get the best ingredients you can buy, that you can find, because it really helps a recipe, especially if you're going through the process. It's better to use the best that you can get. I like to use the Italian brands, but feel free. There's great other brands as well. And then I'm gonna add my teaspoon of salt. So I'm just gonna add all this together. And at the end, you can taste for salt if you need more. I like to just add a little bit and then taste towards the end of the process. So put that in there. I'm gonna give it a good stir. And that is all you need to do at this point. It's really, really simple. So I'm going to make sure it's all blended. Just make sure all of your ingredients are blended. It's a slight orangey red. I'll show you once it's blended. It'll look like this. And it'll continue to just permeate throughout all the flavors and the colors. There we go. So I am going to let that be at the lowest heat for 2 to 3 hours. So I'm actually going to swap this over so you can see my bechamel. So give me 1 second. So I'm going to put this over here, turn it to the lowest heat. And then every 15 to 20 minutes or 20 minutes, just check on your sauce. Make sure that I don't want that too high now. Let's see. I'm going to switch that over. There we go. That's okay. So there. So you just leave your sauce. And then I have my little wooden spoon, and my milk looks like it is ready. My butter certainly is. And then I'm going to add my 3 tablespoons of flour right into my butter, just like this. And then I'm going to stir it. You want to just stir, and this is all about stirring this bechamel. Just keep stirring it. You do not want this to become discolored. So I would keep it at a pretty low, let's see, turn off, a low heat. Just keep stirring. You'll see it blends in really easily and quickly. And if you see any lumps at any time throughout this, you just push them down, whisk them away. Once we get towards the end, I'll show you what this will look like. Let's see, the milk should be ready. So as you start off, okay, this is all blended, my flour and butter, and then you're going to add the milk just 2 tablespoons at a time in the beginning. So make sure that it's hot enough, it's scalded. So now I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons, like I said, at a time, my milk. I'm gonna be very careful because when you heat milk, it's hard to clean up. So I'm just gonna keep stirring this. So just keep going 2 tablespoons at a time. And then once you've added about a half a cup of milk at that in tablespoons, at that point you can add about a half a tablespoon of the milk itself. So you'll see that this quickly becomes a paste. This is otherwise known as a roux. So you'll see that this right now is like a paste. So I'm just gonna keep adding my tablespoons right in there. And keep stirring, like I said. Keep stirring this. This is not difficult at all. If you have never made a bechamel, it's not hard. It's just, like I said, just keep stirring it so nothing sticks. It doesn't discolor. It's pretty easy. And this is great. You can use this with vegetables as well. It's great like on top of maybe for a winter dish, or if you want something a little heartier with your broccoli or some other vegetable. Okay. Then, like I said, you're just going to keep adding this, and it absorbs pretty quickly. So that paste just keeps forming. And I have this at a very low heat. So you can see that it doesn't take that long, this whole process. So it's already just a bigger, more paste we're making. Keep doing this. We're almost ready to add slightly more milk to this. And I've already gone ahead, I'm going to show you, pulled my lasagna sheets over. You can either get the dried lasagna. I like Barilla a lot. This is oven ready lasagna. I actually boil it for 5 minutes. You don't have to. I have tried it. I prefer to boil mine for 5 minutes, but go ahead and try on your own. And then if you use fresh lasagna, then that's great. You can just lay it right out in your pan that you're going to use. I'm going to actually pull this over so you can see. I have about a 9 to 13 inch heavy pan like this. So I am going to use, these are great because they cook really well. They boil and you don't have to break the sheets or use a huge pan. So they're like in halves. I use about 9. So I lay them down. I'm going to show you. Just keep doing my bechamel. And then what you do is, if you do boil them, you're going to, like I said, I boiled these for about 5 minutes, or just according to your package instructions. I mean, there's total other brands, of course. What you do at the end is you're going to strain them in your sink, and then I want you to put cold water over that immediately. And here's why. Because when you go to cook the lasagna, the strips later, it can get really gummy if you don't stop that cooking process. So you're going to run really cold water over that. And then it's great because it's a lot easier to handle. So you're either going to, just make sure my bechamel doesn't stick. I'm going to show you what I've done. I have placed my lasagna on a rack. So you're going to be able to see this. I placed it on a rack like this, just to let it sort of, it's ready to go. It's dried out. It's not necessarily dry, but I cooked it just prior to this. So it's ready. I put all the strips just like this. What you can also do, you don't need this rack at all. You can get dish towels and just lay them out, clean dish towels. And then once you're able to transfer, after you put the cold water onto your lasagna strips, you're just going to lay them out on your clean dish towel and then pat them with a paper towel or another dish towel, just so they're a little bit dry, to stop the water from just pooling on them. And then you're going to be able to work with that really quickly. So once your sauce is made. So I have this, we're almost ready to add more. Okay. Now, this is where the bechamel is starting to, we still have about a half a cup. I can add some more milk in there at this point. It goes pretty quickly. Whoopsie. So it's pretty milky still, but what you're going to want to have like a thick cream. It's going to come out like a thick cream in the end. And it's going to look like it's kind of milky for a while, but don't get worried. Just keep cooking. And if you just cook a little bit longer, if you think it looks too thin, just cook a little bit longer. And when it is ready, I'm going to show you, just in the interest of time, that it's going to look like this. So it's really thickened up, right? So this is like if you had this in the fridge, or, you know, I made this just before so I could show you. So you have this thick sauce. So this will bind your lasagna. So I'm going to keep that there. Keep stirring. And then add all of my milk at this point, because we've reached that point. And then I'm just going to keep stirring this. So it will thicken up. It's amazing. It's probably going to take another maybe 5 minutes, but it will go quickly. You'll see. And at that point, you'll just keep stirring, and then you can set it aside or use it immediately. So I'm going to turn that off. And then I am going to show you, because I've also made some meat already, I am going to put this together. So now I also have my great chunk of Parmesan cheese. Now I always get a really good Parmesan. Never ever use the box version, or the kind that comes in the can. It does not have any flavor. It's not really cheese. So make sure you use this. Like I said, if you're going to go to the trouble, or I don't consider this trouble, but all this effort to make this, be sure to get a really good cheese. So get a good block like that. I actually have this great, we use a lot of cheese, a lot of grated cheese. So I have this wonderful little container that is airtight, and I keep this in my fridge. I've gone ahead, used my grater, grated that for us today. And I think I might have to abandon my sauce for a minute so I can show you what I'm going to do. Now I have made a sauce already, because my other one, of course, is going to take 2 to 3 hours. So I have my completed Bolognese, which is delicious. I'm going to stick it here. And then what you're going to want to do is, here's my spoon, you're just going to grease the bottom of your pan. Make sure you can see this. Grease the bottom of your pan just with a little bit, either of the bechamel or the bolognese. Just take a little spoonful like this and make sure it's all greased. And you're going to want to preheat your oven to 375 degrees before you do this. And then you're going to assemble your lasagna. So you're going to just carefully, gently take your lasagna strips and lay them down. So lay these down. And don't worry if they rip. Sometimes they rip, but it's no big deal because you can just put them together right in the dish itself. They rip a little bit. I think these guys got torn just a tiny bit. Sometimes it's really hard to get them to cook in your pot without them just tearing a tiny bit. So I'm going to just lay this down like this. And then I'm going to take some more of my meat sauce and just make my first layer. So you can be generous, but just make sure you have enough. We're making 3 layers here. So I'm going to keep stirring this guy. So I want to show you what it looks like. So I'm doing 2 things at once, but it's okay. I can multitask. Okay, so we're going to lay this down and I'll show you what this looks like. So you can eyeball and see how much you have here. My first layer. And I see 1 clove. I might just take that out now that I see it. But it's no big deal because it's all softened at that point anyway, so it's not a problem if you might discover it when you bite into it, but it's good. Okay, so I have just about 1 layer here. And then I'm going to add my bechamel. And if your bechamel has been in the fridge, what I would suggest is just to heat it very gently in a double broiler or on a very low heat. Just very gently cook this. Okay, and then you're going to drizzle your bechamel like this. And you can smooth it out. And then add a layer of the Parmesan. So just like that. And make sure you get the edges so it doesn't get all dried out. And then, so you're gonna do that. Add a little bit of your cheese and there we go. You can be generous. It calls for about a cup or 2 of the Parmesan. You can just be generous here. And I will show you. You're just going to repeat the layer. If we run out of time here, I want to show you what it looks like. In the end, this will be your final product, which is absolutely delicious. I'm going to leave that there. And I'm just going to keep assembling. So I'm going to repeat this process. And at the very top layer, all you're going to do is lay down. This is my second layer. But when you get to the top, you are going to just add a thin layer of the bolognese. These guys, lay them out. And then a tiny bit of the bechamel and then the Parmesan cheese. So that's the whole process. And then you bake it for 20 minutes and your kitchen is going to smell amazing. It is so good. So you can see it's a few steps, but totally worth it. Really delicious. You can see that's what my next layer looks like. So I'm just repeating this process. And there we go. So this is going to be a great dinner tonight. My kids love this so much. And like I said, if you want, you can make double and you can, sometimes I'll just put it in containers. And if we want to do like a spaghetti one night, then you have just enough for that. And you're not having to defrost the whole portion, a larger portion. So here we go. So you can see. Right. Here we go. Okay. Okay, so keep going because we don't want to leave any of that. You really just want a little layer at the end for your top, to top it, because the Parmesan makes it look really pretty. So you just have a little bit on top. And if you want, when you get your meat, you can have it double ground, which will actually make it a lot finer if you want to do that. Go ahead and do that. Just might look a little bit prettier. And there we go. So this is my second layer, you can see. And now I'm going to just add some more bechamel and my cheese. And I hope you all get to try this. It's really good. It's work home and have some time. It's worth the effort. Really worth it.